There are many different angles on this issue that we'll cover next year on New Mexico in Focus. Caitlin Henke, thanks for joining us this week to talk about the Me Too movement and your work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
There's been national attention on sexual harassment and assault. Many women coming forward, and men, for the first time to talk about their experiences, including here in New Mexico. Has this changed what you're seeing around the Women's Resource Center?
I've been thinking about that so much because we're being asked that. And I think maybe I was anticipating some kind of shift, and we haven't really seen one. I think, the more reflection, I've realized how privileged I am to work in an environment that is so normalized. We talk about rape culture, that students who are coming in are talking about that frequently, and that's how we know the culture to be. What I have seen changed is that people who are coming in the center and talking about it are feeling really validated outside of the center, that they're having that conversation so many different places that weren't accessible before this. So we're not seeing an increase in reporting, and it's not really changing, but what we're seeing is that it's not just happening in our tiny little world anymore.
That's interesting. The Department of Justice looked at sexual assault and how the university handles it a few years ago. What's changed since that DOJ report on campus?
I think people really realizing for the first time this isn't just a women's issue. I think for a long time, historically, the Women's Resource Center carried a lot of the burden of responding, educating, showing up and being good advocates. And for the first time, I'm really seeing a shift. It's not perfect, but I'm seeing people come to the table and want to collaborate, want to do better, want to take this on, want to be educated, trauma-informed, and want to share the burden and share the opportunity of making this campus a better experience, making avenues for survivors available and accessible. And I think we still have a ways to go, but I'm, for the first time, feeling really hopeful and seeing it change.
What is the potential impact on students who experience harassment and assault, which can mean lots of different things but can have a lasting impact? How do you see that impacting students in the school environment?
Oh my God, the impacts can be devastating. That could derail someone's entire academic career, not to mention kind of their personal life, their personal relationships, their interactions with their families, how they interact and see themselves, how they access their department and their studies. I think people can underestimate how dramatic that impact can be. But I see people who, were really invested in having a really wonderful experience on campus. And then when something like this happens, that trauma can totally derail their entire experience.
It's difficult for anyone to come forward to report, but especially in a small community, and we can think of UNM and the communities within UNM as small communities. Do you hear students talking about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that can be some of the most painful pieces of this, when communities don't show up with support and they're not survivor-focused and victim-centered. I think that can make it almost impossible sometimes to interact with a friend group that you used to be so close with, or a tiny department, or an area of the campus that's like Greek life or athletics or something. It could be so damaging, sometimes even more damaging than the initial assault, when communities don't show up to support and believe.
Now, moving forward, to talk about how to keep this from happening, to change it, does education work to prevent sexual harassment and assault?
I hope so. I mean, that's where I get some hope. What we're really seeing is that peer-led initiatives are so important. And things like healthy relationship education, like what that really looks like when you really, really think about it, how little models there are, how coercion has been such an active part of how people talk about relationships, and real bystander intervention, like teaching people how to intervene, and that the responsibility is really on all of us, that if we see something that is strange or problematic or harmful, that it's not solely on the person who's experiencing that to say, hey, this isn't comfortable for me. So I think education in those two areas is what we've seen to be the most effective. But I'm really hoping that that expands.
And is there a way to educate young people to better support their classmates or their friends if they tell them they've experienced?
Yeah, I think just the exposure of talking about it is a form of education. Like all the platforms that you see it happening now, whereas before, a couple of years ago, sexual assault was a really common topic. But you think of things like Brock Turner or something like that, where the conversation was really different and ended in a really different way. And now, seeing the platforms increase and the avenues to have this conversation have increased, and that has given rise to different opportunities for education to come up really naturally. But we all need to do our part to make this a priority in education, starting when kids are really, really little, and make that a focus and a priority, and definitely on campus. You know, the first areas of education happened in the Women's Resource Center, but now I'm so happy to see that so many people are taking that on, and that's a mandatory component of being engaged in the university system, is that you're gonna engage in a couple hours of education on this exact topic.
And Brock Turner was the young man who was a swimmer, who the judge said his record as an athlete was one of the reasons why he was sentenced to some thought a more lenient sentence than he should have been. The Women's Resource Center started in the 1970s, the same time as the women's rights movement in the U.S. Do you see connections between that time and what we're seeing now?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, the Women's Resource Center is one of the oldest in the country. We're always trying to get the exact date. I think we're older than Berkeley. Obviously, rooted in feminism, activism, and centering accessibility, women's rights, and conversations like this. I don't always want to be the person who's always holding the door and opening the door. It's not only a women's issue, but we're absolutely committed to that then and so obviously now.
Caitlin, we appreciate you being here this week, and we're going to put a link to the Women's Resource Center on our website. If you want to share your story with New Mexico in Focus or talk about what the Me Too movement means to you, go to newmexicoinfocus.org and click on Get in Touch with NMIF staff.